Good morning, Monday morning, beginning of a week, and I know everybody's busy, and I appreciate so much. What a great day! Appreciate you from Faith Baptist Church, and what a great Sunday we had. I think we're the biggest crowd at church we've had since all this started. We just count cars, we don't count people, but a great crowd and visitors in church and people saved, and some other pretty amazing things somewhere down the road we'll talk about. But it was a great day, a great crowd Sunday night. And I know some of you are watching church from home, some of you out of the area, and thank you for being a part of our service in a cyber sort of way. And we've got people from our church who are not getting out, and they're supporting the church financially. Thank you so much for your generosity, and I realize everybody's got burdens, everybody's got needs, but I've talked to several of my friends around the country. Some are having online church, some parking lot services. A couple of them the last week or two have gotten into their buildings. But I've asked, I said, how have your finances been? And it seems like when pressure comes from the outside, the people of God have rallied. And every one of the men I've talked to, they're all sticking within their budget. And it doesn't mean there's a lot extra, but the bills are paid. And I just want to say thank you. You're wonderful people. I love what I get to do. And the trials have not thwarted us. And yesterday was great. Last Wednesday was great in the parking lot there in that island. We're a little closer together, not as spread out. And then, yesterday, Sunday morning and evening was such a good day. And good. I wish I could tell you all the decisions down the road. You'll hear more about it. We're going to be in the book of Matthew. If you'd like to turn there with me just for a minute or two, we'll look at a couple of things here. Matthew chapter 13. Before we get there, I want to mention, in regards to last night, I talked about how Jesus didn't call us to just be passive and opinionless and silly putty that conforms to whatever pressures it put on us. He called us to stand, and our America has been built on standing. And I was thinking, Memorial Day coming up, I remember a president or two ago when we had a real problem in the White House. I went to some of our military guys. They happened to all be two or three of them talking together. And I just said, if it came to where the president was ordering our military to do things that were not right or not constitutional, would you ever consider standing against the government? And one of our men is like a 20-year veteran. He turned around and he didn't even have to think about it. He said, all enemies, foreign and domestic. All enemies, foreign and domestic. It was settled. We'll stand against a domestic enemy of our country, of our Constitution, is as evil and is as much an enemy of the people of America as a foreign enemy. And let me just say this, a Chinese or a North Korean or a Soviet person messing with America's freedom and American people's rights is no more deadly than someone in a governor's mansion or a mayor's house in America. In fact, maybe the local ones are worse because they're right there. They're affecting our daily decisions. And may we not be passive. May we pray and seek God's face. And as I said Sunday night, draw some lines and say, we're not going over this line. You can do what you want, but I'm not giving. But all that. If you didn't get to hear Sunday night's sermon, I hope you'll go back and hear it. These are definitely transitional times, positional sermons. Last Sunday night, I preached on the spiritual wickedness and the demonic forces and in government. And we need to understand those principles. I may preach another part of it because one of our men said, I went back and listened to that, and it just seemed like a lot of it went over my head, and I wanted to get it. And then this Sunday night on our stand. But looking at Matthew chapter 13, I want you to look at a text with me. Jesus is talking about, there's a lot of things in here. He's going through parables, and there's a dozen parables, 12 tribes of Israel, and there's a whole lot of numerical coincidences there. But if you look down there in verse 24 of Matthew 13, another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field, but while men slept. And that's the testimony of danger when we're not paying attention, when we're not vigilant. Freedom demands vigilance. And godliness, moral purity, all those things, they demand vigilance. You're raising a child, you've got to be vigilant because the devil's after your kids every hour of the day. But while men slept, we cannot be sleeping. We need to be awake. his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. Now, there's a lot in that parable, and I just want to say a few things about it. As we've been raised in America, we have been raised under this Judeo-Christian influence, love your neighbor, and all this kind of, and we have had such a good life. Oh, we've been spoiled by the goodness of God. But I want you to understand that sometimes we get thinking mistakenly that as long as I'm good, people will be good to me. As long as I do right, right will come to me. Well, look at the cross. Doing right does not always bring right to you. Being good does not always cause people to be good back to you. The Apostle Paul was certainly good, and evil came his way. Job was good, and trouble came his way. Joseph was good, trouble came his way. And so we need to understand that among the good, and there is good, there's a reason to do good, there's a reason to be faithful, but the devil sows tares among the wheat, and tares look like the wheat, and tares fit in, and yet they're corrupt. And tares can be in the government, and tares can be in the neighborhood, tares can be in the church, tares can be in your own family. And as Christians, we know that there could be evil lurking out there, but we're always shocked by it when it shows up. We're always caught off guard. Now look over to 1 Peter chapter 2, right at the back of your Bibles. If you find 1 Peter, right a couple of pages before Revelation, there's 1 and 2 Peter, then 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. But look at 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2, and look down at verse 12. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 12. Having your conversation honest among the Gentiles. Now, we need to maintain an honest behavior. That whereas they speak evil against you as evildoers, we need to be honest so that when they speak evil against us, that's what he's saying. That we need to do the right thing so that while we are criticized, we need to be upright so that while we are lied about, while they speak against you as evildoers, they may by your good works, which they shall behold, glorify God in the day of visitation. Now, there's a lot of doctrine there, but there's a day coming when there's going to be a visiting. The Spirit of God is either going to work on them now in this life, or they're going to be visited by God through death or through the resurrection, and they're going to face God. And there is a day coming. They will glorify God on their faces before God for your good works. So we need to maintain a godly life so that when people speak evil against us, they will one day, when the day of visitation comes, and a visitation just means like the word visit. I come to your house and visit you. I go to the hospital, I visit. There's a day coming, God is going to visit these people. Now, some cases, it's the conviction of God on their heart, and their heart is broken, and they admit who they've been and what they've done, and they admit that you've been right and they've been wrong. And that happens on earth often. But it will happen when they face God. It will happen when they look to the Lord Jesus Christ eyeball to eyeball, when they fall on their face before God, when the Spirit of God convicts them so deeply of their sin. If they're saved, that will happen. If they're lost, they'll be at another judgment, the great white throne. And the Bible talks, and I talked about this recently, that we will be at that judgment and we will testify against them, and they will admit to the glory of God that though we were mistreated and abused, we kept doing right. So very important. Look at that next verse. Look down at verse 20. Same chapter, 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 20. For what glory is it? What glory is it if ye be buffeted for your faults? You do wrong and you get in trouble. There's no glory for that. What glory is it if you be buffeted for your faults and you take it patiently? But if when you do well and suffer for it, you take it patiently, this is acceptable with God. See, when you do well, he's acting, it's just assumed. Peter is writing to the believers scattered through a godless, dark world, a demonic world. And Peter says, if when you do well and you are buffeted for it. Most of the biggest criticism and slander leveled at me over the last 38 years, most of the time it's been because I have a simple standard. I'm not saying I'm better than anybody, but here's some things I believe, and I'm not going to bend on those things. And people don't like people who won't bend. and they criticize and slander him. They want us all to be pliable, like Mr. Pliable in Pilgrim's Progress. If you've not read that, you ought to read it, watch it, find it. There's an old cartoon when we saw years ago, Little Stick Man, but man, it's tender. It's a touching thing, even because the story is so incredible. Mr. Pliable, who will always bend and mush, and the world expects that. And when we become rigid, when we stand, no, this is right and this is wrong, oh, the world doesn't like that. And if when you, verse 20, if when you do well and suffer for it, I can promise you this, there's an awful lot of suffering done because people did right. I mean, whether it be at the hands of the reformers, who when somebody said, I'll not have my child baptized, and they take those children from those homes, they kill those parents, drown the parents, torture them on the rack, and all types of horrible tortures. Why? Because they're doing right. Because they took their Bible and they said, we're not bending on this. And the number of people, Richard Wurmbrand, if you never heard the stories, back in the 60s, 50s and 60s, Richard Wurmbrand's story became famous, Tortured for Christ. And when I first got saved, I got a hold of that, the stories that came out of Russia and the Soviet prisons and the torture that Richard Wurmbrand and others went through for their faith. Filthy, shameful things. Why would somebody be so ugly? Because when you do right, it makes people angry. When you won't follow them to their shameful behavior, it makes them angry. And it's a difficult, difficult thing. So Peter encourages believers to patience. You look there at the end of verse 20. If you do well and suffer for it, and look at the last phrase in verse 20, chapter 2, verse 20, and you take it patiently, this is acceptable with God. Now, number one, our job is to be patient. Patiently take the abuse. Don't bend. Don't give in. Stand and take whatever comes. And God says that's acceptable. It's acceptable. You see the people come back from military with a leg blown off, with a wounded, they're in a bed with an IV hooked up to them, and some commanding officer comes and salutes them and encourages them and says, you're a good soldier and you've done a good job. No one mocks the guy who's wounded in battle. And when you've stood for right and when you've stood for good, your commanding officer comes by spiritually and one day literally and physically, and he will say, good job, soldier. Thank you for standing. And it's acceptable behavior. I don't mean it's acceptable that God likes you being hurt or he likes me being lied about or whatever it might be. I mean our behavior, our staying in the fight. And you know, at 62, 63 next week, 63. I don't know how many years I've got left to pastor, but if this was the last year or next year or 5 years, 10 years, I have no idea. But I hope God lets me keep serving him somehow. And I don't care what I get to do, but I want to read his word. I want to pray. I want to witness. My pastor Blue up in Redding, 93 years old. Just the other day I was talking to him. He was able to lead someone to Christ that he was witnessing to, I think at a hospital or something. And he's been faithful through the years. A great testimony of the missions teacher. He's in heaven now, Maurice Paulson. He told us a story. He was in the North Pacific during World War II in a ship. And he said that there'd be downtime and the ship would be out there in calm waters. And he said there'd be kind of some, whatever you call it, you military people know more than me, but basically some downtime, that there's nothing going on, a little free time. And he said the men would be looking at dirty magazines and gambling and telling stories. And he said, I don't want to be around it. And he said, I remember one day on the deck, he was cleaning out his gun. And again, I apologize for my vernacular, my cheap vocabulary, but he's on a battleship and he's working on this gun, just basically taking it apart, putting it together, cleaning it, making sure it's all ready to go. And no one else is around. He didn't have to be doing it. And he said, I just felt like someone was looking at me. And he said, I turned and looked, and several decks above him, if deck is the right term, he said, I look up and the commanding officer's looking down. He said, he's smiling at me. He's smiling at me. And he told us the story as I tell it to you. He said, I want to so live that when my heavenly commander looks down at me, he smiles at what I'm doing. And it might be we're taken advantage of, and it might be we've been lied about, or might be someone's hurt us or accused us, as he says there in verse 12. When they speak against you as evildoers, they make you out to be evil. But they see your good work. They see you keep doing good. And by God's grace, may we keep doing good works, because that's acceptable with God. And they The people who slander and criticize and hurt you and me, they will one day glorify God in the day of visitation. And so let's just decide we're going to keep doing right. Let's just decide we don't do these things in order to be treated right. And in our country, oh, we're so blessed in America. Most of the time you do right, you're going to be treated right. Well, we'll honor Politician Day and Law Enforcement Day, and they'll come to our church. We'll give them a gift, and we do want to honor our leaders, but don't expect them to always be on our side. There are some who are. There's some godly people who believe the Constitution and believe in right. But in this day we're in right now, understand we could do right and be ill spoken of. We could be slandered. We could be criticized. We could be persecuted for doing right. But there's two things that we stand on. Remember, this is a child of God. Number one, as a citizen, you stand under the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. As a Christian, you stand under this book here. And between our national documents and our spiritual documents, those are what we stand under. And you know what? The world can like it or lump it. And but our job is to keep doing right. Paul wrote to the Corinthian church, don't be weary, and be not weary in well doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. Don't be weary. Keep doing right. Keep doing right. Trust God. Hey, Wednesday, don't miss Wednesday. Wednesday night we'll be there. Now, you that are watching online, watch online. It'll be live stream. But you that can, come Wednesday night as we study this thing of faith, and we're going to step into some new material this Wednesday night. And at each evening of my evening post tonight and each night this week, we're following the lesson I do, my evening post, by a soul winning time. And you're going to hear from some great soul winners this week. Oh, you're going to enjoy it. And we've got some great things that have come in. Go Oishi's he's one of the best young men for soul winning and bringing visitors to church. Ken Peterson is one this week you'll get to hear from, and he likewise so faithful all these years, winning souls, bringing them to church. You're going to get to hear some great truths about soul winning. During this downtime, boy, let's be faithful. Let's be faithful. And don't forget Wednesday. And it could be a day off before or after because of timing, but Wednesdays to be the delivery of 10,000 gospel tracts, gospel flyers into the mailboxes of people around our church. That basically the closest 10,000 mailing addresses, they're going to get the clear example of the gospel. Take some time, would you? Maybe before you get your day going, take some time to pray. God bless those people as they get their mail. Help them to look at it and to be sensitive to the Spirit of God. Thank you again for a great Sunday. Boy, praise the Lord for his goodness. I hope you have a great week. Let's walk with God. Live this week for God. Pray for your country. Pray for your state. Pray for your church. Now, let's be good. Let's love people as we go through this world. All right. God bless you. Have a great day.